The day of my parents' will reading dawned bright and cold, sunlight streaming through the mahogany-paneled windows of Wilson and Associates' law office. I sat quietly in the corner, watching my brother Mark strut around the room in his tailored suit, already acting like he owned everything in sight. Which, if I was being honest with myself, he probably did. "Miss Sarah Bennett," the lawyer's voice cut through my thoughts. "Are you ready to proceed?" I nodded, gripping the arms of my leather chair. At 32, I was about to find out what my parents really thought of me. Before we see what happens next, drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community. I walked out of the law office and into the biting wind of the parking lot. The heavy oak doors hadn't even clicked shut before I heard the click-clack of expensive Italian leather on the pavement behind me. Hunter. Of course, he wasn't done. Winning wasn't enough for men like my brother. They needed the loser to admit defeat. He leaned against the hood of my 6-year-old sedan, blocking the driver's side door. He looked like a model for a magazine about people who ruin the economy for sport. He adjusted his silk tie, grinning down at me. "Don't worry, Ella," he said, his voice dripping with faux sympathy. "I'm not going to leave you out in the cold. I'll make sure you get a job at Sterling Dynamics. The mailroom is a mess. They could use someone with your attention to detail." He waited. He wanted the explosion. He wanted me to scream that I had a master's degree in forensic data analysis, that I was overqualified to run the entire department, let alone sort his junk mail. He wanted the tears. He wanted the drama so he could call me unstable and justify cutting me out. I gave him absolutely nothing. I call it the Grey Rock method. It's a psychological survival tactic I perfected when I was 12 years old. When you are dealing with a narcissist, you don't fight and you don't flee. You become a gray rock. Boring. Unresponsive. A textureless object that offers no emotional supply. "That sounds generous, Hunter," I said. My voice was flat, a dial tone in human form. "I'll think about it." His smile faltered for a fraction of a second. He was bored. He kicked the tire of my car and gestured to the painting I was holding. It was wrapped in brown paper, heavy and awkward. "At least you got that piece of trash," he laughed, regaining his footing. "The chaos theory. Dad always hated that thing. Kept it in the basement storage for years. Honestly, you should just burn it. It'll save you the storage fees." I unlocked my car and slid the painting into the back seat. I didn't defend the art. I didn't defend myself. I just nodded. "Okay, Hunter. Drive safe." I got in, started the engine, and pulled away without looking back. But as I merged onto the highway, the mask dropped. My pulse wasn't racing from fear. It was racing from adrenaline. Hunter thought he had buried me. He thought that by giving me nothing, he had rendered me invisible. He was wrong. Most people hate being overlooked. They fight for the spotlight. I cultivated the shadows. In a family of loud voices and massive egos, the quiet one becomes the archivist. They think invisibility is a weakness. They don't know it's a security clearance. When no one looks at you, you see everything. I knew about the offshore accounts Hunter thought were untraceable because I was the one who balanced the ledgers he left on the kitchen counter. I knew about the meetings Dad took in the middle of the night because I was the one awake, listening to the floorboards creak. They gave me the painting because they thought it was garbage. They thought it was a final insult. But as I glanced at it in the rearview mirror, I didn't see a dusty canvas. I saw a loose thread. And I was going to pull it until the entire tapestry of their lies unraveled. My apartment isn't a home. It's a clean room. White walls, steel surfaces, and a dedicated server rack humming in the corner where most people would put a television. I don't do clutter. I don't do sentimentality. I deal in data, and data requires a sterile environment. I carried the chaos theory inside and set it on my drafting table. Under the harsh halogen lights, it looked even worse than I remembered. It was a violent explosion of blacks, crimsons, and sickly yellows. It looked like anger captured in oil. Dad had hated it because he said it lacked structure. Hunter hated it because it lacked market value. But as I stared at the canvas, stripping away my personal history with the object, my training took over. I'm a forensic data analyst. I find the story hidden inside the numbers. And looking at this mess, my brain started to itch. The splatter pattern in the lower quadrant was too rhythmic. The layering of the red over the black wasn't accidental. It was sequential. I pulled the blackout shades down, plunging the room into darkness. I reached into my toolkit and pulled out a high-intensity UV lamp. When I clicked the light on, the painting disappeared. In its place, a ghost emerged. The pigments my mother had used weren't just paint. They were chemically treated compounds that reacted to specific light spectrums. The chaotic swirls vanished, revealing a perfect, luminescent grid beneath the surface. It was breathtaking. It was the most disciplined thing I had ever seen. It was binary code. I didn't gasp. I didn't smile. I went to work. I set up a high-resolution camera, photographed the grid, and fed the image into my primary workstation. My fingers flew across the mechanical keyboard, the clicking sound the only noise in the apartment. I ran a spectral analysis to separate the layers of code. Layer 1 was a date stamp from 10 years ago. Layer 2 was an encryption key, polyalphabetic and high complexity. Layer 3 was the payload. I executed the decryption script and watched the progress bar crawl across the monitor. The useless painting was a storage device. My mother, the woman everyone dismissed as a trophy wife with a hobby, had encoded terabytes of information into a single canvas. The screen flashed green. Access granted. A string of numbers appeared. I recognized the format immediately. They were GPS coordinates. Latitude and longitude pointing to a location deep in the Nevada desert. Below that, a series of alphanumeric strings, server root access keys. I leaned back in my chair, the glow of the monitors reflecting in my eyes. Hunter had offered me a job in the mailroom because he thought I was stupid. Dad had left me this painting because he thought it was worthless. They looked at the surface and saw trash. I looked at the data and saw a map. This wasn't an inheritance. It was a dossier. And the coordinates didn't just point to a location. They pointed to a grave my father had been digging for decades. The silence of my apartment was shattered by a sound that wasn't digital. It was a fist pounding against my front door. Not a knock. A demand. I didn't jump. I didn't scramble to hide the painting or the monitors. I simply minimized the decryption window, walked to the door, and checked the security feed. Hunter. But this wasn't the Hunter from this morning. The tailored suit was rumpled. His tie was loosened, hanging askew like a noose he'd just managed to slip out of. He was sweating. The golden child was tarnishing in real time. I opened the door, leaving the security chain engaged. A 3-inch gap. Enough to hear him, not enough for him to force his way into my sanctuary. Hunter, I said. My voice was cool, detached. It's late. Open the door, Ella. He hissed, glancing nervously down the hallway. We need to talk. Right now. I made a mistake. The painting. I have a buyer. A private collector. He just called me. He wants it. He was vibrating with anxiety. He shoved his hand into the gap, trying to push the door open, but the chain held. How much? I asked. $20 million, he blurted out. $20 million, Ella. Cash. Wired to any offshore account you want. Tonight. Just give me the canvas. I stared at him through the crack. 6 hours ago, he had laughed at me. He had told me to burn it. Now he was offering me a fortune that would make most people faint. But I didn't faint. I calculated. Hunter didn't know about the code. If he knew what was on that canvas, he wouldn't be offering money. He'd be here with a wet work team to silence me. He was here because someone else, someone terrifying, had called him and screamed at him to get it back. This is the narcissist's blind spot. It's a fatal error in their operating system. People like Hunter and my father move through the world assessing value based on surface appearance. If it glitters, it's gold. If it's dusty, it's trash. They lack the curiosity to look deeper. Hunter had held the keys to the kingdom in his hands this morning, and he had thrown them at me because they didn't look like keys. He discarded the painting because he couldn't instantly monetize it. His arrogance was his security flaw, and I had just exploited it. There is no collector, Hunter, I said. Don't be stupid. He shouted, his voice cracking. You don't know what you're holding. You think you're smart? You're nothing. Dad is going to. He stopped. The color drained from his face. He had said too much. Dad is going to what? I asked softly. Dad is dead, Hunter. Isn't he? He slammed his shoulder against the door, a desperate, animalistic attempt to break in. The wood groaned, but the steel chain held. Give it to me. Or I swear to God, Ella, you won't survive the night. I didn't flinch. I looked him dead in the eye through that 3-inch gap. Not interested. I slammed the door in his face and threw the deadbolt. I heard him screaming my name, kicking the wood, but I was already moving. The offer of $20 million confirmed everything. This wasn't just corporate theft. This was something worth killing for. And if Hunter was this scared, it meant the person pulling his strings was already on the way. I had maybe 10 minutes before the polite knocking stopped and the door came off its hinges. I grabbed my go bag from the false panel in the back of my closet. It had been packed for 3 years. Burner phone, encrypted hard drives, $10,000 in cash, and a Glock 19. I wasn't paranoid. I was the family accountant. I knew exactly what kind of people my father did business with, and I knew that eventually the ledger would have to be balanced in blood. I slipped out the fire escape just as a black SUV screeched to a halt in front of my building. Men in tactical gear spilled out. They weren't police. They were cleaners. I didn't stick around to introduce myself. I drove through the night, swapping license plates at a truck stop in Arizona. The GPS coordinates from the painting didn't lead to a bank or a safe house. They led to the middle of the Nevada wasteland, a place where the map turned into a blank grid of beige nothingness. 6 hours later, I was standing in front of a concrete scar in the desert floor, a decommissioned Cold War missile silo. It looked abandoned, a relic of a dead era. But when I brushed the sand away from the rusted keypad, the biometric scanner hummed to life. I punched in the binary sequence from the painting. The heavy steel doors didn't creak. They hissed, pneumatic seals breaking with a sigh of pressurized air. I descended into the dark. The air grew cold. The smell of dust was replaced by the sterile scent of ozone and cooling fans. When I reached the bottom of the spiral stairs, the lights flickered on automatically. I wasn't standing in a bunker. I was standing in a data center. Rows of server racks stretched into the darkness, blinking with millions of tiny green lights. This was the black box. This was where Sterling Dynamics kept the bodies, not the physical ones, but the digital ones. The illegal arms deals, the bribed senators, the doctored safety reports for the AI defense systems. I approached the main terminal. It was air-gapped, completely cut off from the outside internet. That's why the painting was necessary. You couldn't hack this from a laptop in a coffee shop. You had to be here, physically touching the keys. I accessed the root directory. I expected to find my father's encryption. Gregory Sterling was a brute force coder. His security was heavy, ugly, and obvious. But this system was elegant. It was fluid. It was familiar. I pulled up the system logs. My breath caught in my throat. User, admin_CS. Last login, yesterday. CS, Christina Sterling. My mother didn't die in a car accident 10 years ago. That was the lie they told to explain the closed casket. That was the narrative they spun to explain why the brilliant cryptographer suddenly vanished. I scrolled through her journals, hidden in the system's kernel. She hadn't been killed. She had run. She had faked her death to escape my father because he wasn't just selling tech. He was selling state secrets to foreign adversaries. She had built this place not to hide the crimes, but to archive them. To build a case so watertight that when she finally pulled the trigger, he wouldn't just go to prison. He would go to hell. She hadn't left me a painting. She had drafted me into her war. I wasn't just the daughter of a victim. I was the daughter of the mastermind. I reached for the drive to start the copy sequence, my hand trembling for the first time in 24 hours. But before my fingers could touch the keyboard, the facility's floodlights blazed on, blinding me. The elevator behind me chimed. I turned around slowly. Gregory Sterling stepped out of the freight elevator. He wasn't the frail man I remembered from the blurry funeral photos. He looked robust, tanned, and terrifyingly alive. He was wearing a tactical vest over his dress shirt. Hunter stood behind him, looking like he wanted to vomit. "Hello, Ella," Gregory said. His voice was warm, almost fatherly. It was the same tone he used when he fired people. "You found the place. I knew you were smart, but I didn't think you were this smart." He walked toward me, his boots echoing on the metal grating. I took a step back, positioning myself between him and the terminal. "You're supposed to be dead," I said. "And you're supposed to be irrelevant," he countered. "But here we are, full of surprises." He stopped 10 feet away. He gestured to the rows of servers. "Do you know what this is? This isn't just data, Ella. This is the future of warfare. Autonomous drone swarms. AI-driven targeting systems. Your mother built the most sophisticated defense network in history, and she was going to give it away to the government for free. Can you imagine the waste?" He shook his head, looking genuinely disappointed. "I stepped in. I monetized it. I sold it to the highest bidder. It's just business." "It's treason," I said. "It's perspective." He shouted, his mask slipping for a second. "And now you're going to give me the decryption key so I can scrub these drives and relocate. Or you're going to die in this hole." He pulled a pistol from his holster. He didn't hesitate. He leveled it at my chest. Hunter made a strangled noise. "Dad, don't. You said we were just going to scare her." "Shut up, Hunter." Gregory barked, not taking his eyes off me. "Give me the code, Ella." "The painting. What was the key?" I looked at him. I looked at the gun. And then I looked at the terminal behind me. My mother had anticipated this. She knew Gregory better than anyone. She knew he would eventually find the lab. She knew he would threaten, he would kill, to protect his empire. So she built a trap. The painting didn't contain a decryption key. There was no way to scrub these servers. The binary sequence I had decoded wasn't a password. It was a broadcast signal. "I'm not giving you the key, Dad," I said, my voice steady. "Because there isn't one." I turned my back on him. I heard the safety click off the gun. I didn't flinch. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. "Ella!" Hunter screamed. I typed the final command. "Execute." The screens around us didn't go black. They turned bright red. A siren began to wail, a low, mechanical thrum that vibrated in my chest. "What did you do?" Gregory yelled, lowering the gun slightly in confusion. I turned back to face him. I smiled. "I didn't unlock the system," I said. "I published it." On the main screen, a progress bar hit 100%. Upload complete. "Every file, every email, every blueprint in this facility has just been sent to the FBI, the CIA, Interpol, and the New York Times," I explained. "It's over, Dad. The world knows." Gregory stared at the screen, his face draining of color. He looked at his gun, then at me, then back at the screen. The realization hit him. Killing me wouldn't stop it. Nothing would stop it. The sound of helicopters thumping overhead broke the silence. "They're fast," I noted. "Mom must have put a priority flag on the alert." Gregory dropped the gun. It clattered on the metal floor. He sank to his knees, not in prayer, but in defeat. Hunter collapsed against the wall, sobbing. I walked past them. I didn't look back. I walked to the elevator and hit the button for the surface. I emerged into the blinding Nevada sun, just as the black helicopters descended, kicking up dust and sand. Tactical teams swarmed the silo entrance. They yelled at me to get down. I complied, raising my hands. But I wasn't afraid. I was done hiding. The takedown wasn't cinematic. It was efficient. Federal agents swarmed the silo entrance like a colony of ants attacking a dead beetle. I watched from the perimeter, wrapped in a foil emergency blanket I didn't need. I wasn't in shock. I was just observing the data points. Gregory tried to run. It was pathetic, really. He scrambled toward a hidden service hatch, but he was tackled by 3 agents before he made it 5 yards. He didn't look like a mastermind anymore. He looked like an old man terrified of the consequences he had spent a lifetime avoiding. Hunter didn't run. He sat in the dust, weeping as they zip-tied his hands. He looked at me as they dragged him away, his eyes wide and pleading. He wanted me to fix it. He wanted his sister to make the bad numbers go away. I didn't look away, but I didn't wave either. I just watched. Emotion is just noise in the signal. I tuned it out. In the weeks that followed, the Sterling Dynamics stock price didn't just drop. It evaporated. The assets were seized. The brand became radioactive. The board members resigned in disgrace. That's when I made my move. My mother hadn't just left me a map to the crimes. She had left me the resources to clean up the mess. A separate, clean trust fund, hidden under a shell corporation that Gregory never knew existed. I bought the intellectual property of Sterling Dynamics for pennies on the dollar. I didn't buy the luxury offices or the private jets. I bought the patents. I bought the potential. 6 months later, I sat in the CEO's office. The mahogany desk was gone, replaced by a glass drafting table. The name on the wall didn't say Sterling. It said Aurora. The abstract painting hung on the wall behind me. To anyone else, it was still just a chaotic mess of colors. To me, it was the founding document of a new empire. My phone buzzed on the desk. A single, encrypted text message from a number that didn't exist. "Well played, CEO." See. I smiled. She was out there, watching. My father and brother believed that family was a hierarchy, a structure of control where blood demanded loyalty regardless of character. They were wrong. They fought for the crown. I fought for the kingdom. True legacy isn't what you inherit. It's what you protect. Family isn't the DNA you share. It's the alignment of purpose. I had cut the rot out of my life, and in the silence that followed, I had finally found my voice. If you believe that truth is the only legacy worth fighting for, hit that like button and share this story. And tell me in the comments, would you have exposed your family to save your integrity?